Picture a crisp Canadian night in late 2003. The air thick with the electric hum of a packed hockey arena in Calgary, Alberta. The rink glitters under harsh stadium lights, the crowd's cheers swelling like a tidal wave as fans await the first puck drop. In the stands, a 22-year-old man named Michael Bridges clutches his ticket, his heart racing not just for the game, but for the sheer luck that brought him here. 700 miles from his struggling life in Brandon, Manitoba, Michael had won a sweepstakes on a whim, landing him an all-expenses-paid trip to this professional hockey match. For a guy who'd spent the last year drowning in financial woes, a brutal breakup, and the slow fade of his friends, this felt like a lifeline. A rare moment where the universe seemed to tilt in his favor. But as he sat there staring at the ice, he had no idea that this night wasn't about luck at all. It was the opening move in a carefully orchestrated trap, one that would unravel a secret he'd buried years ago. Calgary in 2003 was a city alive with hockey fever. Its downtown pulsing with fans in team jerseys, their breath fogging in the cold November air. The Saddle Dome Arena, a concrete behemoth, was a cathedral of Canadian pride where strangers bonded over slapshots and beer. Yet beneath this vibrant surface, Calgary had its shadows, gritty bars, late-night strip clubs, and whispers of crime that lurked just beyond the neon lights. For Michael, though, the arena was a sanctuary, a brief escape from his life in Brandon, a smaller city where opportunity felt scarce and loneliness clung like damp snow. Back home, he'd been scraping by jobless, his apartment a mess of unpaid bills and memories of a girlfriend who'd left him shattered. The sweepstakes ticket was his golden ticket, a chance to feel alive again, to be part of something bigger. As Michael settled into his seat, a stocky man with a thick mustache plopped down beside him, his grin wide and infectious. "Man, I'm so excited to be here." The stranger said, his voice cutting through the crowd's roar. "I won this ticket in a sweepstakes." Michael's jaw dropped. "Dude, me too," he replied. And just like that, a spark ignited. The man introduced himself as Brock, a blue-collar type with a hearty laugh and a knack for making Michael feel seen. They swapped stories over the game, Michael opening up about his rough year money troubles, the breakup, friends who'd ghosted him. Brock listened, nodding his eyes, sharp but warm like he got it. For Michael, who'd felt invisible for months, this was a lifeline. The game flew by the ice, a blur of speed and violence. But it was Brock's easy camaraderie that made the night unforgettable. When the final buzzer sounded, Brock turned to Michael with a glint in his eye. "Want to keep the party going? There's a strip club just down the road." Michael, riding the high of new friendship and free drinks, didn't hesitate. "Let's do it," he said. And the two men spilled out into Calgary's chilly streets, the city's pulse thrumming around them. But as they stepped into the neon-lit club, something shifted. Brock's wallet seemed bottomless. Hundreds in tips for bartenders' rounds of drinks, for both of them, a wad of bills tossed at dancers like confetti. Michael, who could barely afford a coffee back in Brandon, was floored. Who was this guy? A blue-collar worker like him didn't throw money around like that. The question nagged at him, but the free drinks and Brock's charisma drowned it out. For one night, Michael felt like he belonged somewhere. Yet beneath the surface, this wasn't a random encounter. The sweepstakes, the shared seats, Brock's perfect timing, it was all too neat, too convenient. What were the odds that two strangers, both claiming to have won the same contest, would hit it off so seamlessly? And why did Brock seem so interested in Michael, a broke nobody from a nowhere town? These questions didn't cross Michael's mind that night, but they should have. Because this wasn't just a friendship. It was the first step in a game Michael didn't even know he was playing, a game that would lead to a hotel room, a confession and a truth so dark it would shatter everything. Let's pause here and consider what might have been brewing. Was Brock just a generous guy with a lucky streak, or was he hiding something? Could this have been a genuine friendship, or was Michael being sized up for something sinister? Maybe Brock was part of a criminal underworld scouting recruits with cash and charm. Or perhaps, and this is a stretch, but bear with me, something about Michael's past had already caught someone's eye. Someone with the power to pull strings. I lean toward the idea that this wasn't random. The sweepstakes feels like a setup, a lure to draw Michael in. But for what to understand, we need to follow Michael and Brock beyond the rink, into the shadows, where their story takes a darker turn. The Calgary Strip Club was a haze of pulsing music and dim lights, the kind of place where secrets could hide in plain sight. Michael stood at the bar, a beer in hand, watching Brock toss bills like they were nothing. The dancers swirled the crowd, cheered, but Michael's eyes kept drifting to that wad of cash in Brock's hand. It didn't add up. Brock dressed like a working stiff flannel shirt, worn boots, but he spent like a king. Michael, whose bank account was a constant source of dread, couldn't help but envy him. When he thanked Brock for the night, his voice cracked with gratitude. "I don't want to go back to Brandon," he admitted, the words spilling out. "This is the most fun I've had in forever." Brock paused, his smile sharpening. "Brandon? That's crazy. I'm moving there for work." Michael's heart leapt. This wasn't just a one-night connection. They could be real friends. A couple of months later, in February 2004, Michael sat in the passenger seat of Brock's car, on the streets of Brandon, slick with winter slush. The two had just grabbed lunch, a routine they'd fallen into since Brock's move. Brandon was quieter than Calgary, its low skyline dwarfed by sprawling prairies and a sky that felt too big. For Michael, it was a city of dead ends, empty bars, shuttered shops, and the weight of his own failures. But Brock's arrival had changed things. He'd kept his promise from Calgary, helping Michael find an apartment and, more crucially, work. The jobs, though, weren't what Michael expected. Brock had roped him into delivering packages around town, small parcels wrapped tight with tape. "Don't look inside." Brock warned, his tone casual but firm. "Just drop them off and keep your mouth shut." At first, Michael hesitated. The secrecy screamed trouble, drugs maybe, or something worse. But then he thought of that night in Calgary, Brock's cash lighting up the room. Money like that could change his life. And honestly, what did he have to lose? His apartment was one missed rent payment from eviction, his fridge a sad collection of ketchup packets and beer. So he took the first job, his hands sweaty as he handed over the package. Nothing happened, no cops, no fallout. Emboldened, he took another, then another, each delivery dulling his unease. Whatever Brock was into, Michael told himself it couldn't be that bad. He wasn't hurting anyone. He was just a courier, a guy trying to survive. But survival came with a cost. That February day in Brock's car, as they cruised down a Brandon back road, Michael's world tilted. Brock's phone rang, and his voice shifted low, deferential, like he was talking to someone who held all the cards. Michael caught snippets. "Yes, sir. I'll handle it." Then, without a word, Brock hung up, yanked the wheel, and sped in the opposite direction. Michael gripped the armrest, his stomach churning. What's going on, he wanted to ask, but Brock's silence was a wall. Minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel, its neon sign flickering like a dying pulse. The place was a dive-peeling paint, cracked windows, the kind of spot where deals went down and questions weren't asked. "Stay here," Brock ordered, his voice clipped. He marched to a motel door and pounded on it, the sound sharp against the winter quiet. Michael watched, his breath fogging the car window as the door cracked open. A woman stood there, her face pale, eyes wide with what looked like fear. She tried to slam the door, but Brock shoved it back, his bulk filling the frame. Their voices rose, a heated exchange Michael couldn't make out. And then it happened. Brock's fist shot out, connecting with the woman's face. She crumpled to the ground, and Michael's heart stopped. Brock didn't pause. He straddled her, his fists raining down, blood pooling on the concrete. Michael wanted to scream, to run, but he was frozen, his mind reeling. This wasn't just shady. This was brutal. When Brock finally stood, he slammed the door and strolled back to the car's, calm, as if he'd just grabbed a coffee. He slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove off without a word. Michael stared straight ahead, his hands trembling. The blood, the woman's crumpled form, it was seared into his brain. When they reached his apartment, Brock finally spoke, his voice low and cold. "Don't tell anyone what you saw." Michael nodded, barely able to choke out, "Yeah, I won't." He stumbled inside the door, locking behind him, but the image of that beating clung to him like a shadow. What was happening here? Was Brock a thug for some criminal syndicate enforcing debts with his fists? Were those packages part of something bigger, drugs, weapons, or worse? Or had Michael misread the situation? Maybe the woman was in on it, a setup to scare him into silence. But the blood looked real, the violence raw. I can't shake the feeling that this was a test, a way to push Michael deeper into a world he didn't understand. He was in too deep now, tied to Brock by money and fear. And yet, a part of him still trusted Brock, still saw him as the friend who'd pulled him out of despair. That trust would lead him to a hotel room days later, where the truth would come crashing down. A week after the motel incident, Michael's phone buzzed with Brock's name on the caller ID. He stared at it, his gut twisting. He hadn't told anyone about the beating, but the silence hadn't eased his dread. If anything, it made him feel complicit, like he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Still, he answered, his voice steady despite the panic. Brock didn't bother with pleasantries. "Got another delivery," he said. You still, and Michael knew he should say no, walk away, but the memory of Brock's fists and that wad of cash loomed large. He needed the money, and he feared what Brock might do if he refused. "Yeah," he said finally, "I'm in." Brock's tone warmed, almost approving. "Good. The boss is impressed with your silence." The call ended, and Michael grabbed his keys, his heart heavy, but his resolve set. He'd keep playing along for now. By February 2004, Michael and Brock had settled into a routine. They met for meals at Brandon diners, Brock always footing the bill, his generosity a constant reminder of the life Michael craved. But one day, as they sat across from each other, Michael noticed a change. Brock was restless, his fingers drumming the table, his eyes darting. "You okay?" Michael asked, half expecting a brush off. Instead, Brock leaned forward, his voice low but eager. "Things are more than okay. I've got an offer for you, something that could change your life." He explained that he and the boss were impressed with Michael's loyalty, not just for keeping quiet about the motel, but for never peeking inside those packages. They wanted to bring him deeper into the organization. Maybe give him a role like Brock's, more responsibility, more prestige, and crucially more money. Michael's pulse quickened. This was it, the chance to escape his dead-end life, to have the kind of cash Brock flashed so effortlessly. But a flicker of unease lingered. The boss. Michael knew almost nothing about him, only that he was someone who didn't tolerate betrayal. The motel incident proved that. Still, the promise of wealth dulled his fear. Brock had one condition: Michael had to prove he could be as cutthroat as him, capable of more than just deliveries and silence. The words hung in the air, and Michael froze. What did that mean? Did Brock expect him to hurt someone like at the motel? Or was this another test, a bluff to see if he'd crack? Then it hit him. Michael didn't need to prove anything new. He already had a story, a dark, awful secret from his past that showed he could handle anything. 2 years earlier in 2001, his girlfriend Erin Chorney had tried to break up with him. The rejection had ignited a rage he couldn't control. He'd attacked her, his hands closing around her throat until she went limp. Panicked but deliberate, he'd filled the bathtub and held her under, watching the life drain from her. Then he dumped her body, erasing her from his world. The memory was a weight he carried alone, but now it felt like a twisted asset. If he told Brock and the boss, they'd see he was tough, ruthless, one of them. So in that diner, Michael looked Brock in the eye and spilled it all, the strangling, the drowning, the cover-up. Brock's face was unreadable, but when Michael finished, he nodded. "Okay," he said. "You're ready to meet the boss." The meeting was set for a few days later at a fancy hotel in a nearby city. Michael arrived nervous but hopeful, the promise of a new life dangling before him. The hotel was a stark contrast to Brandon's grim motels, polished marble floors, chandeliers casting warm light, a view of the city's skyline glittering through the suite's windows. Brock was waiting in the lobby, his smile reassuring. They headed to a lavish room, but it was empty. "The boss doesn't wait for anyone," Brock said. "Sit, he'll be here." Michael's nerves frayed as he sank into a plush chair. The room was too quiet and the stakes too high. If he impressed the boss, he'd be set. If he failed, he could lose everything, maybe even his life. Brock, sensing his anxiety, offered a distraction. "Run through your story one more time," he said. "Get it sharp for the boss." Grateful for the task, Michael launched into it again, recounting Erin's murder with chilling detail. As he finished, a knock echoed through the room. Brock's eyes flicked to the door. "He's here," he said. "You ready?" Michael nodded, bracing himself. But when Brock opened the door, it wasn't the boss. A swarm of Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers stormed in, their badges, glinting, voices sharp as they shouted, "Michael Bridges, you're under arrest for the murder of Erin Chorney." Michael's world collapsed. The sweepstakes, the packages, the motel beating it was all a lie. Brock wasn't a criminal. He was an undercover RCMP officer, and every moment of their friendship had been a meticulously crafted sting to elicit Michael's confession. The packages just flower props to make him think he was in deep. The motel woman, an actress, her blood from capsules hidden in her mouth. The hotel room rigged with cameras that recorded every word of Michael's story. He'd walked right into the trap, his own darkness betraying him. I can't stop thinking about the betrayal here. Michael trusted Brock, saw him as a friend, a savior. To learn it was all a lie, it must have gutted him. But was the RCMP right to go this far? They caught a murderer, but at what cost? Staging violence, exploiting Michael's desperation. It feels like a moral gray zone. And how did they know to target him in the first place? That's the piece we're missing, and it haunts me. But with Michael in cuffs, the focus shifted to the woman he tried to erase, Erin Chorney, whose story deserved to be told. Erin Chorney was more than a name in Michael's confession. She was a young woman with dreams, fears, and a life cut brutally short. The document tells us little about her, but let's imagine her for a moment, a woman in her early 20s maybe, with a laugh that lit up a room, or a quiet strength that carried her through Brandon's long winters. Perhaps she loved the prairie's wide skies, or dreamed of leaving for a bigger city, a fresh start. Whatever her story, it ended in 2001. In a moment of rage, she couldn't escape. Michael's hands stole her breath, her future, and for 2 years, her body lay hidden, her family left to wonder where she'd gone. When the RCMP recovered her remains after Michael's arrest, they gave her a proper burial, a final act of dignity for a life taken too soon. Erin's family isn't mentioned in the document, but their pain is easy to imagine. The call from the police confirming her death would have been a dagger relief at knowing mixed with the crushing weight of loss. Maybe they held a memorial in Brandon, the church packed with friends and neighbors, their tears falling as they remembered her smile. Maybe they still visit her grave, leaving flowers and whispering apologies for the years she was lost. In Brandon, a city of tight-knit streets and familiar faces, Erin's murder would have sent shockwaves. People would have whispered in diners, glanced over their shoulders, wondering how a killer had lived among them undetected. Calgary, too, would have felt the ripples its hockey fans reading headlines about the sting that started in their arena. The media likely seized the story. A 2004 newspaper in Calgary might have screamed, "Hockey game sting nabs murderer," while Brandon's local papers focused on Erin, her photo, a young woman with bright eyes plastered across front pages. The RCMP were hailed as heroes, their undercover work a testament to ingenuity. But not everyone would have cheered. Some might have questioned the sting's ethics, faking a sweepstakes, staging a beating, pushing Michael to confess. Was it justice or entrapment? Social media wasn't big in 2004. But if this happened today, X posts would explode with hashtags like "Wanich Justice for Erin" or "Yanich RCMP Sting," some praising the police, others debating whether they'd crossed a line. The case's impact stretched beyond headlines. Erin's death, tied to a breakup gone wrong, would have spotlighted domestic violence in Canada, a scourge that claims too many lives. In 2003, about 70 women were killed by intimate partners in Canada, a grim statistic that Erin became part of. Her story might have pushed Brandon to hold vigils, start support groups, or teach young women to spot red flags. The RCMP's tactics, meanwhile, could have sparked debates about undercover work. In 2004, Canada's entrapment laws were strict, requiring police to avoid inducing crime. Did the RCMP skirt that line by making Michael think he was joining a criminal empire? It's a question that lingers, one I wish we had answers for. And then there's the biggest mystery: how did the RCMP know to target Michael? The document doesn't say, but let's speculate. Maybe a tip came in a friend who overheard Michael's drunken confession, or a family member of Erin's who never bought his story of her leaving town. Maybe forensic evidence, like a hair or fingerprint, pointed to him years later. Or perhaps the RCMP were investigating a broader case and Michael's name surfaced. Without this piece, the sting feels like a puzzle, with a missing edge, its brilliance undercut by the unknown. Michael was convicted of Erin's murder and sentenced to life, his days now spent behind bars. But the story doesn't end there. It lives in the questions we can't answer, the shadows that cling to Brandon's quiet streets. Did the RCMP's victory justify their deception? Could Michael have been caught another way, without breaking his trust so brutally? And what about Erin? How do we honor a woman we know so little about? I think her legacy is a call to listen, to see the signs of violence before it's too late. This case haunts me because it's not just about a murderer caught. It's about a friendship built on lies, a woman lost to rage, and a community left to wonder what else hides in plain sight. So what do you think? Was the RCMP's sting a stroke of genius, or did they cross a line? How do you think they zeroed in on Michael? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm dying to hear your theories. If this story gripped you, hit that subscribe button and check out our other true crime tales, like the one about a vanishing hiker that's just as chilling. Until next time, keep your eyes open. You never know what secrets the person next to you might be hiding.